It's all you. All right, so this is episode 174 of Beer Sports Whatever. My name is Mike, the Hebrew Hammer Brown. I am joined by, first of all, we're live here on Twitter. We're live here on Facebook. I am joined by Don Knock. First of all, Don, thank you so much for joining the show tonight. First of all, your story is awesome. Okay. Like you literally went from the bottom to the top. Tell BSW a little bit about where you started, where you're at now. Because I remember, man, like I literally remember you
Yeah.
being a part of Rockets Twitter and you joined it from the bottom, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And now you're a name stain, man. And it's awesome. And I'm so blessed to have you. But tell BSW a little bit about where you were, where you are now. We want to know everything about you.
So, okay. I've actually never told this whole story before. So, yeah.
We want to hear it, brother.
Man.
We want to hear it.
You're getting the full exclusive, dude.
Oh, for sure.
So, I was on Twitter back in 2009. I did no sports. I was only doing music stuff. I was like following different artists and different producers and stuff like that. I was like, I love music. And I love sports back then too. But that's what I was on Twitter for specifically. The Harden years started coming hard and heavy. And then people got more engaged and active on Twitter and stuff like that. I actually started out on Clutch Fans. That's where I started posting most. Right. And then I was posting on a website called The Collie as well. And then Real GM. So I posted mostly on those two websites. And then there was like an incident that happened on Clutch Fans. And like, I'm not going to be too messy with it. One of the posters was like harassing another poster about their son who had like a learning disability. And a number of us were like, this guy needs to go. This guy needs to get out of here. Like, what are we doing? The owner of the site ended up banning a lot of the people that were like saying this dude needs to go. And then he ended up letting us back on later on. But he suspended the guy that was involved too. But he was just like, I'm just going to get rid of all of y'all. And I'm gonna be done with it. So he suspended me from Clutch Fans. So I couldn't post there anymore. So I was like, I have to take my posting somewhere else. So I jumped over to Twitter. I was on Rockets Twitter. I knew a lot of people that were former Clutch Fans posters that were now on Twitter, right? Rocket Girl, Fire Bear, Ben DuBose, my guy Trey Klein, and a number of other people as well. I'm sure I'm forgetting a lot of people, but so I moved over to Twitter. I started just doing the same things I was doing on Clutch Fans now on Twitter. And, I interacted with people. Like I probably had, 300, 400 followers. It was just, your run of the mill Rockets Twitter type account. And then the pandemic hit, right? And with the pandemic, I traveled for work. I was doing a lot of stuff for work where I was just sitting around a lot, just waiting for people to show up and that type of thing. So I was like, I listened to 20 podcasts at that time, maybe more. And, I listened to them just because I enjoyed them. I wasn't, trying to make anything out of it. And then somehow it came up on Twitter one day. Someone was like, I can't stand Brian Windhorst. I can't stand Chris Vernon. Like, I hate these guys. Blah, blah, blah. And I was like,
yes.
I was like, dude, I listen to their podcast like all the time. Like, it's no big deal. It's no big deal. And so I was like, shit, thinking like market inefficiency. What's something that people, it's like an underserved market. I was like, I'm listening to this podcast anyway. I'm doing it for free. Hey, let me see if I can help other people out that don't want to listen to it and, get some retweets off of it. And that's honestly, like when I first started, that's all I wanted. I was like, maybe I can get some retweets, get some likes on my tweets. And, that would be super cool. And so I started doing that and slowly, people caught on. They were like, hey, I love the summaries because, I don't want to listen to Brian Windhorst. I don't want to listen to Chris Vernon, whatever the case may be. And from that point, bigger and bigger accounts would see those and retweet and stuff like that. I had people, Red 94, Jackson Gatlin, Ali Khan Johnny, like these people reached out to me like, hey, I've seen your summaries, like that's cool. And that's really all it was at that time. And then one week, Jackson and Ali Khan started doing something called Locked On Rockets Film Room. Yep. And, they would bring Ali Khan on. He would talk about Rockets X's and O's. And that's something I am specifically passionate about, right? I love the X's and O's. I did play basketball growing up. I had a lot of friends that, played very high level or were very good. I had one friend that he was in the G League for a while, another one that played D1. He had some great moments in the NCAA tournament. So, I was around high level basketball from a young age. So I was exposed to it. And so I love Ali Khan's work, just to shout him out as well. But after they did the Locked On Rockets Film Room, on Green Room, they would do something called, Locked On Rockets Film Room after dark. And they would bring people from the audience in, similar to y'all show that y'all do on Green Room, just bring people from the audience up. I jumped on one day and they're like, oh, it's the famous Don Knock that does the Twitter summaries. And I was like, yeah, that's me. Like, I don't know what else to say, but I'm here. And like, I love the Rockets, and that's really what it is. And, from that one time, they brought me back on. And sorry, go ahead.
No. So I want to ask you, real quick, you've been a Rockets fan, for years, from what it sounds like. I mean, you've been
from the time my earliest memories of the Rockets are like the Yao years, just with my age. The Hakeem years, I wasn't old enough to really remember a lot of it.
Yeah.
My first memories are, Yao getting drafted, the T-Mac 13 and 35, like all of that type of era. One of my favorite players early on was Rafer Alston, right? I love shifty guards.
Baby!
Yeah, I love the guards with like a shifty hand. Like I like Kyrie. He's kind of down bad right now with the vaccine stuff, but just in terms of a basketball player specifically, I love Kyrie's game.
Yeah.
I love Chris Paul's game. I feel like Chris Paul is someone who he has a very good handle, and I guess like the real basketball diehards will ride for Chris Paul in terms of having one of the best handles. But the casual fan sometimes like they shit on Chris Paul. It's like, hey, Chris Paul, what has he ever won? Like, whatever the case may be. But I love Chris Paul too.
Fair.
James Harden, another player that had an incredible handle. So we've been very fortunate as Rockets fans to have a lot of guards that have great handles. But yeah, so I've been a Rockets fan dating back to that time. I was born in Houston, raised in Houston. I did live in Louisiana for 4 years. I went to school out there, and then I came back to Houston, and now I live there full time. But yeah, man, like I said, Rockets fan from the time I can remember, basically.
Yeah, I mean, between you and I, right? I mean, let's get into the nitty gritty of what this team is right now. This team sucks. Look, we're not a part of any platforms. This is you and I talking right now.
Yeah.
Rockets basketball. Okay. This team is terrible. This team sucks.
I mean, this team's going to end up with a top 3 or 4 draft pick, basically, like depending on how the lottery goes, right?
Do you care about that though? Like, because last year, right, this team did the same thing.
Yeah.
And I've been consistent on they underperformed in the lottery last year. Like the Rockets had the worst record in the league by 5 games, and yet they still did not get the first overall pick in the draft.
So, with that, right?
That's where I'm at.
Yeah. So with that, right, they flattened the lottery odds to try to avoid teams tanking. So,
which I love. I love what the NBA has done.
So if you have the worst record, then you have the even chance with the other 2 teams with the bottom 3 records to get that top overall pick. So, if we had gotten the 4th pick, I probably would agree with you that we underperformed the lottery odds. I think it was unfortunate that we didn't get the first overall pick, but I do think it was fortunate that we didn't give our pick to the Oklahoma City Thunder because, I remember very vividly the lottery night and everything that went into that. We actually did a live stream for that night. We had, however many people in there for that. And, everyone at the same time, that fifth pick comes up, and that's the pick that the Rockets needed to make it past the 5th pick. So that way they didn't give their pick to the Thunder. And everyone's just, sphincters are clenching. The tension is so high, blood pressure skyrocketing. And finally they called out. I think it was the Magic had the 5th pick. I can't remember. Sorry about that. But whoever had the 5th pick. Yeah, Magic has the pick. Okay. So the Magic pick gets called out, and everyone in the space just goes screaming at the top of their lungs, go Rock, like everything like that. And so, I agree that the team is not good. They're not in a good place right now. And, I was feeling pretty good about the team until the incident that happened the other night against the Nuggets. I think that kind of exposed some things that even people who are, fanalists or analysts like ourselves, I wasn't aware of a lot of that stuff was going on. Since that time, I've tried to, reach out to people that I do know and see, were they aware of this? What's the kind of trajectory of that? But at the time, I had heard different things along the lines of like, Christian Wood, you see his effort on the court. And, is he wanting a max contract? Is he wanting to be moved? I heard some rumblings along those lines and that type of thing. But, with the Kevin Porter Jr. situation, it just seemed like he was in a much better place than he had been at in Cleveland. And, like I said, I traveled for work. I did spend last winter in Chicago, and Cleveland, very close to Chicago, just geographically. I felt the effects of that, seasonal affective disorder. You're up there, the sun goes down at like 4:00. It's cold all the time. And he's from Seattle, but he went to school in California. And so I can see how that would put you in a bad mental space if you're already someone that's dealing with, various issues, whether it be anger management, depression, whatever the case may be, bipolar, stuff like that. But it seemed like when he came to Houston, he was in a better space. We've heard everything about John Lucas and how he's just such an incredible guy and mentor for these guys. And I've said this a couple of times, like this is no shot at John Lucas, right? John Lucas, you can say best character coach in the NBA. And I would say absolutely 100% agree with you. But at the end of the day, John Lucas can only do so much, right? It's on Kevin Porter Jr. to really apply what John Lucas is telling him. And so that's why I've told people for a long time. It's like, again, John Lucas can be everything short of Dumbledore, right? If Kevin Porter Jr. isn't going to take the knowledge and apply what he's telling him, John Lucas can only do so much. But it was interesting the way things shook out. It seemed like the way that event really transpired, it was, the issues first with Christian Wood not showing up to the COVID test on time, not showing up to shoot around on time. The team was playing really well, and it went to a Kevin Porter Jr. ISO after the team had just scored 7 points in a row, and Coach Silas called a timeout in the middle of the ISO. They go to timeout, they come back. Kevin Porter Jr. is taken out, even though he had just had a really hot stretch, and Christian Wood is inserted into the game. And Christian Wood he mailed it in. Like, he mailed it in on par with, I won't say on par with what Harden was doing, but, at least on par with what PJ Tucker was doing last year. Just kind of, running around, taking a shot when the ball gets to me. And again, right, you don't have to be Red Auerbach. You don't have to be, Phil Jackson to see, Christian Wood's out there not giving his 100%. And he was giving more effort on the offensive end than the defensive end. But, again, casual observer is still going to see that, Christian Wood not communicating, not rotating, not being in the place he needs to be, not being attentive to his man. And, they went to the locker room at halftime. And, whatever the sequence of events was, they had the unnamed player that was a young player that called out Christian Wood. Kevin Porter Jr. gets into it with Coach Lucas. And I think Coach Silas, what he said about this event was kind of telling, where he said the Kevin Porter Jr. incident and the Christian Wood incident are two separate things. And Jackson Gatlin had Chris Mannix on his show yesterday, and Mannix was on there saying, they both quit. And if you really hash out the details in that Athletic article, it was Christian Wood. They went through whatever halftime. They told Kevin Porter Jr., you're not going back in the game. And that's when he left the stadium. And so I think there is a little bit of nuance to be had there in terms of the coaches took Kevin Porter Jr. out and Christian Wood took himself out. And, what Kevin Porter Jr. did in terms of leaving the stadium is absolutely not acceptable. But I think there is a difference, like Coach Silas said, between the coaches removed Kevin Porter Jr. from the game and then he removed himself from the stadium versus the coaches wanted Christian Wood to go back into the game. And Christian Wood said, I don't know about this. And, whether Christian Wood is, protecting himself because he thinks he's going to be traded, or, he's just out on the team as a whole. Because like you said, Christian Wood came to this team as someone who's going to play with James Harden and Russell Westbrook. And that's not where this team is at in its life cycle. This team is rebuilding. I think they're probably going to finish with the third or the fourth worst record in the league this year. And, if you're getting Kevin Porter, Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, Josh Christopher, 20 to 35 minutes a game, somewhere in there, then I'm okay with the losses. Are they fun? Absolutely not. Every time we win, I'm overjoyed because I don't like to see my team down bad. I don't like to see my team struggling out there. And if those guys are at least playing and developing, I think I can, accept where they are in their life cycle now. But I think at the end of the day, we start owing our pick to Oklahoma City again in 2023. By the time we owe that pick to Oklahoma City again, I want this team to at least be in a play-in spot, competing for a spot where they don't have to be in the play-in. I think that is the goal for me of once that year hits where we have to give our pick to Oklahoma City again, I don't want to be in a situation where we're worried about that pick going over to them.
So let's get into I get the X's and O's of this, right? Of this team. I want to get into the fandom with you. Okay?
Yeah.
To leave the X's and O's at the door. Because I get it, right? I get everything that you're saying. I get everything that this team is about. But my thing is, and I have not strayed away from this since this year started, 3-prong. Number one, we don't have the right owner to run this team. Fertitta is not the right guy to run this team. Number two, I don't think Silas is the right guy for this team, as a head coach. I've said this before on the Dream Take. My guy, 26,000% is Sam Cassell. I want Sam Cassell to be the owner of this, or to be the head coach of this team. I don't want Tillman Fertitta to own this team. I don't believe that Tillman Fertitta is the right guy to run this team. Where are you at ownership-wise? What are your thoughts on the owner of this team being Tillman Fertitta? Are you a Tillman Fertitta guy? Do you think he's the right guy to run this team?
So when Fertitta first bought the team, I was initially excited that someone that was from Houston was going to be owning the team. Again, born and raised in Houston. A lot of people that are that way, that are born and raised in Houston, they have, a loyalty to the city, and also they kind of like other people that are from Houston, in certain positions. We've seen that with Gerald Green and even Daniel House before things went left in the bubble. A lot of people before everything in the bubble, they wanted to see Daniel House succeed, right? And it was that way with me for Fertitta. During the Harden era, I think there were a lot of things that I didn't like about ownership. Not him personally, just with some of the moves that they made. I didn't like the Ariza, not re-signing Ariza. I think, again, the amount they probably would have had to pay Ariza was too much. But I think just from a salary cap standpoint, if you have that salary on the books, they would have been able to do more things from a cap flexibility standpoint that they weren't able to do because they gave him up and they signed James Ennis, where, James Ennis, they ended up, I think, waiving him at the end of that year to get off some of his salary. So that happened. There was another thing where they could have re-signed Iman Shumpert, and they didn't go that route either because, it was a cap savings thing. And Tillman Fertitta really over-leveraged himself to buy the team. I know he's talked about it a couple of times, like he's very big into, sole ownership of things. And so he wanted to do that so that way he would eventually have sole control of the team and not be in an ownership group, kind of like what we've seen with Golden State, for example, where they have a group, or even the Sixers. The Sixers have a ownership group, and you've seen those teams be willing to spend way beyond the salary cap. So that was initially my concern with Fertitta was some of the salary cap machinations that went on with that team. It's hard to delineate sometimes, like what was Fertitta, what was Morey, what was the other people in the front office, but it seemed like there was a directive, like we want to get under the salary cap at all costs. And they had some deals at trade deadlines where they got off some players' contracts to get under, and we've seen other teams do that. That's not unique to Houston. So initially with those first Harden years, I was very skeptical of Fertitta. Like I said, I didn't like a lot of those moves. Since Stone has come in, it seemed to me like, how do I want to explain this? It seemed like when Morey was there was this tension between Fertitta and Morey where Fertitta wanted the credit for things, and just with from a national standpoint, Daryl Morey was given all the credit because it was like, oh, the MIT guy, the genius, he's in here getting all these non-guaranteed contracts for Chris Paul. We've never seen anything like this. And, when something would go good, Morey would get the credit for it. And when something would go bad, it was all the way Fertitta's fault. And, I can understand you're an owner, you're a billionaire. I'm sure there's ego that goes on in that situation. Morey was never really his guy. And it seemed like once he got rid of Morey, Morey went to go spend more time with his family, quote unquote. Once he got Stone in there, yeah, exactly. Once he got Stone in there, it seemed like he was a little bit more hands off. So for me, it's like two eras, right? The Morey era for Tita, I was very skeptical. I didn't like a lot of the moves that he did at that time. Since Stone has come in, it seems like he's a little bit more hands off. It seems like he is letting Patrick Fertitta be more involved. And without being in those rooms, it's hard to know how much he's involved. But Tillman Fertitta, as an owner that's just going to own the team, let Rafael Stone operate and do everything he needs to do, I'm comfortable with that. If he does decide to get more involved again like he was before, he hasn't done a lot of interviews recently. He's done, Bill Worrell going away speech and the video again last night, but we haven't heard from Fertitta as much as we were hearing from him when Morey was here. And, Morey also was a guy that was very vocal and very in the media, and you don't see that from Stone. Stone is very, very reserved. You hear Silas most of the time. So that's my perspective on Fertitta right now. I'm kind of neutral on him now versus before during that Morey era. I was fairly skeptical of him and what the team was doing.
Well, Don, let me ask you, man. I mean, look, I'm a fan. Okay. I mean, you look behind me, man. I got the Rockets bobbleheads. I got the Tracy McGrady, bobblehead, from the Skeeters behind me. And
I remember that was a wild time when he was playing for the Skeeters. I do remember that. That was a crazy moment in history.
I got the bobble right behind me, man.
I love that.
And the thing is, I appreciate what you're telling me, but my thing is, the Rockets organization has let down the fan base by the moves that they've made over the past couple of years. Like, you can't look at this situation and tell me, look, once again, my personal opinion, the Harden deal was an F-. Like, the move that they made for Harden made no sense for the Rockets outside of the fact that you lucked into the pick that you got for Jalen Green. Congrats, you got Jalen Green, but you didn't get Miles Turner. You didn't get what's his name? Jared Allen.
Yeah.
Jared Allen is the guy for me that everybody has talked about. My thing is, as a Rockets fan, this front office has let down the Rockets fan base to the nth degree over the past 2 years with the moves that they've made. And it's unacceptable. And it's the reason why there are fans out there that have said, you know what, to you, Rockets organization, that I'm not buying your season tickets. I'm not going to buy your season tickets to go to a game where I'm going to buy some stupid, foot long with what's it called? With the
Fruit Loops
and the
macaroni and cheese
and the bacon. Like, it's bullshit. You know what I mean? Like, that's horse shit. Like, I'm not doing that. I'm not gonna buy, some stupid hot dog, with all of those things on it. It's not fun. It's not exciting. It's not. The Rockets have done wrong by their fan base over the past 2 years, is my opinion. That's where I stand as a fan.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, you and I are on the similar playing fields where you and I both talk to Rockets fans night in and night out with what we do. I feel like you're a little bit more excited about the future of the Rockets than I am. Tell the fan base, man, why are you more excited about the Rockets with where they are?
So, but before I get into that, I do have one question. How did you feel about the Ben Simmons package that was kind of floated around? And we'll say with Tyrese Maxey or without Tyrese Maxey, either one. How did you feel about that package?
I would have taken Ben Simmons and or Tyrese Maxey in 5 seconds, because that package makes us better now, man. Because my thing is, if you build this roster around draft picks, I hate that shit. I hate it. I hate it with a freaking, like, I hate it. Don, I swear to God,
Yeah.
don't talk to me about draft picks. I don't want to hear it because this past year, the Rockets fell short of what they should have gotten in the draft. You know, they were the worst team by 5 games plus with where they were record wise, and they still didn't get the best pick in the draft.
Yeah. So
that's where I'm at.
Yeah. So personally for me, I'm not too high on Ben Simmons. I went to LSU and, you know, I saw how he operated there and it wasn't great as alumni. And then what he's done in Philly, you know, Ben Simmons is a good player. Steve in the chat, the Oladipo swap, I definitely agree with that. And from what I've heard, that was really something that they entertained. Coach Silas wanted Oladipo to, you know, give him a shot. And I think they banked on him staying healthy, and that was a bad gamble. So, you know, I wasn't crazy about the Oladipo move. I thought I saw the potential upside for it. Personally, the injury that he had is just not one that a lot of guys ever really get back to full strength with. So for me, that was a very strange gamble. But back to Ben Simmons, right? You know, I was never super high on Ben Simmons. If they were able to get Ben Simmons and Tyrese Maxey back for James Harden, I think that package made sense. Sorry. From what I've heard, they were not able to get Tyrese Maxey from Philly in those negotiations, and that's why they balked, and that's why they went with the Brooklyn package. Another factor that went with that was, and we've seen this again, I've heard this again about what Stone's going to end up doing with, you know, the guy just said move Eric Gordon. I think Stone wants to have a reputation of, I'm someone who does right by the players. I'm someone that, you know, when we have these guys that are vets, we get them to a destination that they're comfortable with. And we're still in the teardown. We're still in the teardown phase of the, yeah.
Don, let me stop you real quick. Okay. Yeah. Because I feel like I want to address what you just said. Okay. Mm-hmm. First of all, what beer are you drinking tonight?
Yeah, this is a local beer from Austin, Spot On Pills. I don't know. I picked this up right by my hotel, so it's pretty good. I'm not gonna say I recommend it, but it's not bad. If you're out here and you need to grab something real quick, I would say it's a good option.
Okay,
I like that. Do right by the fans. I do like that. That's funny.
Look, man, Lewis Pops Brown, co-host, Beer Sports, whatever. I want to challenge you on what you just said because the organization doesn't owe jack squat to any player that plays for them. They don't owe anything. They don't own anything. They don't owe anything to Eric Gordon. They don't owe anything to PJ Tucker. They don't owe anything to James Harden. Like, they don't owe anything to any of these players.
I think
like you can't I think the situation, and you can't say the Rockets owe something to Eric Gordon. They don't owe anything to Eric Gordon because they gave him the contract. Like, I don't understand anybody that says that this team owes anything to their players. You trade them for the best package possible is wrong.
So I think the reason that they would want to go that route where they're, you know, quote unquote, doing right by the players, I think it's more of a perception thing than it is actually them, you know, quote unquote, owing something to these guys, right? If you're an organization that a superstar thinks, if I go there and you know, something goes left, I know that they're going to send me to a good destination, you know, if we have some sort of falling out. I think in an organization's mind, that's a good reason for, you know, doing right by the players. So we'll say, because it's like we want to make our organization as somewhere that superstars feel like that's a good spot for me to go. They're going to, you know, let me, you know, operate how I want to operate. Then they're going to put me in a good position to win. And, you know, if things do go left, you know, I'm not worried about, you know, them holding me out for 4 years like Philly's threatening to do with Ben Simmons right now. I think for a superstar, that's, you know, a nightmare scenario. And what we're seeing with John Wall right now, I think that has the potential to, you know, go that direction too, because when the season started and it was like, oh, John Wall and the Rockets have agreed to sit out, you know, oh, that's great. You know, we get Jalen and KPJ time to play. And then, the Chris Mannix report comes out. Oh, why are y'all not playing John Wall? And here come the rumblings of, John Wall wants to play again. And, I can understand why people don't like that. That is a reality of the league. But at the end of the day, right, these superstars have way too much control in teams. And, when Daryl Morey was here, he just basically bent over backwards for James Harden, let him do whatever he wanted to. And I'm definitely receptive to the argument that they went too far in doing that they should have pushed back against James Harden, specifically in the Chris Paul trade saga. I think there were other factors that went along with that, why they ended up moving Chris Paul. But, a lot of that was Russell Westbrook became available from the Thunder because Paul George asked out, and James Harden heard that through the grapevine, whether it was directly from Russell Westbrook or, from other people that know both of them. I did not like the Russell Westbrook trade, and I'm someone who loves Russell Westbrook's game. Other than, that year that he was competing for the MVP with Harden, I was a huge Russell Westbrook fan. Everyone can understand like why you like Russell Westbrook's game, right? Plays hard, good leader, good guy off the court, all that stuff. But I think for me, I would have liked the organization to push back on that and say, hey, look, giving up 2 picks and 2 swaps to get a guy in Russell Westbrook is, that's a pretty high bar to clear. But, circling back to the original point, right? They had kept Paul and traded Harden. That would have been a tough sell at the time. In hindsight, yeah, that would have been a stroke of genius type of move because Chris Paul just aged absolutely beautifully.
But Don, here's the thing, man.
Yeah.
I'm with you. Okay. I'm with you on everything that you said. But at the same time, like at this point, the Rockets have to act in an aggressive manner. They've got to do what they think is best for the organization. You got to get some guys who are ready to play right now, in my opinion. 2 guys that come to mind are both in Indiana, and that's Miles Turner and that's Sabonis. Go get either one of those dudes.
So before
that's where I'm at with this Rockets organization is act like you want to win today. That's where I'm at.
So after we traded Clint Capella, Miles Turner was a guy who I really loved his game. I think he cleans up a lot of mistakes for guys that aren't elite defenders, and that allows you to have other players that are more offensively minded. When we did sign Christian Wood, I was super happy that he came here because that was a time where, James Harden and Russell Westbrook had just left the team. And as a Rockets fan, you're like, like, why don't these guys want to be here? What did we do wrong? And to have Christian Wood choose the Rockets, and that was a great moment. I remember that free agency time very vividly. And so I kind of put the Miles Turner stuff on the back burner. I think for us to bring in a guy like Miles Turner, obviously you're gonna have to trade Christian Wood first. Whether we trade Christian Wood or not, you have Şengün there. You have Şengün there.
Come on, man.
You're gonna have to sort that out in the near term, right? If you bring in Miles Turner, I think there's a lot more logical of a fit with Şengün. And so I do like that fit as well. I think Şengün and Sabonis is a little bit redundant. They do stuff that's similar. I think I would prefer like a guy like Turner that has, more defensively minded, but can still, give you things other than just defense, right? He's a guy that can spot up from 3. He's a guy, we saw when he was playing against the Rockets, he just destroyed us in pick and roll. He destroyed us running the floor in transition. And, some of that again was Christian Wood not being attentive in transition defense, not being attentive to role communication and tagging and things like that. But I'm definitely receptive to the idea of bringing in a guy like Miles Turner. For me, again, like I said earlier, I think I want to have guys who are really getting the ball rolling in terms of making a good playoff push in 2023. So this year, I'm okay with where we are at. Next year, I definitely want to see them starting to move because, again, at the end of this year, we'll have Jalen Green and we'll probably have one other guy as a top 3 pick. So moving into next year, I want to see them moving towards a play-in spot, right? And then by that 2023 season, I want to see them moving towards a not play-in type of playoff seeding.
Can I ask you that a quick question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why 2023?
Okay, so
Like, to me,
Yeah.
I mean, like, it feels artificial that that it's 2023. Why not next year?
I think
Why not 2024?
again, so
What is 2023?
2023 is the year when we owe the Thunder our pick again. So if we're bad and by worst case scenario, if we're bad, we're giving that pick to Oklahoma City, and that's historically been a rival for us. So in addition to just owing a team to a pick, or owing a pick to a team, we're also giving it to a team that has historically been a rival. We have the Harden trade, and then the Şengün trade. That's kind of adding a little bit more fuel to the fire. I'm hoping everyone that's watching the stream will still be here in 2023, and we'll see the Rockets on the top. Yeah, I'm manifesting that into existence. But would I like the team to be more competitive sooner? Yes, I think if we get a guy like Banchero in here next year, or even a guy like Jabari Smith, I think those two guys are just immediately slot in to a place that I expect Christian Wood to no longer be here after the trade deadline. I think that's the direction it's trending. So again, if you get one of those guys in here, I'm comfortable with those.
You think he's
I think if they can get any sort of respectable type of deal, that they're going to move Christian Wood at the trade deadline. Yeah, that's where my thinking is today.
Do you want him gone? I mean, so, you Don Nye. I mean, do you want Christian Wood gone?
I think what happened the other night really solidified it for me. That yes, I do want him gone. Before the season,
I'm curious more than anything.
Yeah. So before the season, I was one of the people that was like, hey, we need to gather more data on what this looks like with Şengün, with Jalen Green. Let's see what's going on. Even as close as like 2 weeks ago, we were on with Jackson on our show, and him and Prodigy were kind of arguing the Christian Wood point. He brought up that if you have Christian Wood there, that's someone that KPJ and Jalen Green can get pick and roll development reps with. And I was like, that's a good point, right? You want those guys to know what it's like to play with a good role man and give them the vertical spacing that can really open up other things for their game. But I think with the event of the Nuggets game, and even if, let's say, the stuff about what happened in the locker room and him not wanting to go back in the game doesn't come out, just the way his effort has been trending the last 3 weeks, I think that's not something you want to see out of a guy that, continues to say, I'm the leader of this team, everything falls on me. And then you watch his play on the court and you're like, are you really playing to the level of someone that wants to be a leader? And, guys are going to make mistakes, right? Guys are going to have bad plays and stuff like that. But, effort is something that you have very, very deliberate control of. Attention to detail is something you have very deliberate control of. And, I think just from that angle, Christian Wood has not been fulfilling the role of someone that calls himself a leader on this team. I'm not going to say that I don't want him to be around the young guys. I've heard that argument that people are like, I don't even want him to be around the young guys because it's bad for development. I don't think it's to that point yet. But for me, I think going into this trade deadline, you see what the packages are. We heard Kevin O'Connor say that Charlotte has interest in Christian Wood. Just with the way salary matching would go in a trade with Charlotte, they're going to have to give us a player that I am personally interested in, right? PJ Washington is a name we've heard floated out. Kai Jones is a name we've heard floated out there. Maybe some picks. If they could get a deal that's in that construction, do it right now. Yeah, guys that want to be here long term, I'm definitely with that as well. And as much as Eric Gordon has played the role of someone, he's had one of his best career years this year, right? You can tell just from how Eric Gordon spoke in some of the post-game press conferences. He's not a guy that wants to be here. And we've heard that from Tim McMahon as well. Eric Gordon wants to go and play for a contender. So, take the best deal you can get for Eric Gordon. Take the best deal you can get for Christian Wood. DJ Augustine and Daniel Theis, those guys have shown that they are capable of coming in here, getting whatever minutes that the team is willing to give them, not complaining. And then, when their number is called, they go out there and perform like a professional. So if those guys are still here after the trade deadline, I have no concerns over them. I think they're good locker room guys and all of that stuff. But Wood and Gordon for sure, take what deal you can get them out of here. Whatever the team looks like after the trade deadline, you start reassessing. Again, if Jalen Green takes a leap, you get that guy in here next year, and if we get a Jalen Green leap in the second half of the season, and we get a top 3 whatever pick, and it's Paolo, Jabari, or I'd even be receptive. Jaden Ivey is a guy that a lot of people have been trying to convince me about recently, but you get one of those type of guys in here, and going into next year, you see how the team performs, and if the team looks like they're good going into next year's trade deadline, then I would be right along with, let's get some more guys in here that are talented. We have all the picks from the Brooklyn deal. You can start consolidating those picks and doing stuff. But at least for this year, I want one more pick. If we have a team that comes into next year with a new draft pick and looks good, then I think you can start really phasing your way out of that rebuild, because that's still, within that timeline between here and, like we said, 2023. 2023, I don't, for me, it's not that I don't want to be competitive until 2023. It's that by 2023, that's when you need to start really becoming aggressive. So if we're good before then, I'm totally fine with that, because that means Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, Josh Christopher, those guys have all looked good. And we talked about this in the spaces a couple of times too. If we overperformed this year, and it was because you're getting those guys tons of minutes and tons of reps, and they just looked incredible, then, we don't need another draft pick at that point, because Jalen Green's a franchise cornerstone. Alperen Sengun's a franchise cornerstone. Josh Christopher, maybe 6 man, or even, who knows, point guard of the future. KPJ possibly, outperforming the top 55 protected pick that we traded to get him. But I think for where I'm at right now, those are my big keys for the next 6 months is, let's move Wood, let's move Gordon, let's get another draft pick in here, stop it at the top of next year. And, then we can reevaluate what it looks like in summer league, what it looks like in preseason. And, that's when you're starting to get on the time frame of what the Grizzlies look like at that point in the development, because you have to also think, right? Rockets fans we've had a team that's been competitive for a long time. And I understand like that it's hard to go from a team that's, perennial Western Conference Finals, contender to where we are now. But the James Harden trade, I think it's not even been a year since they did the James Harden trade. So that is a very quick timeline for a rebuild, not even 365 calendar days. And if we were done with the rebuild in that amount of time, that's amazing. Rafael Stone did an amazing job, but Don, I think going into next year, that's when I want to start moving forward.
But Don, my thing is, they made the trade within the past year. It's still an F-, for a trade. I mean,
but when you trade a superstar, I get the return package is definitely not what a lot of people want, right? But when you trade a superstar, and we traded 2 superstars, right? We traded Russell Westbrook and James Harden. And people would say, yeah, we got John Wall back. John Wall that wasn't a sure thing when we traded for him. He was a guy that was coming off, Klay Thompson style injury package. And, people didn't know what you were going to get from John Wall. And I've had people tell me that we need to play John Wall right now because other teams still don't trust what they saw from John Wall last year. And so, having moved 2 superstars in the last, 13 months, it's not even, for me, it's not even about the trade package, right? Like I like the trade package. A lot of people didn't like that trade package, right? And, I would have liked to get someone back from Brooklyn as well. Just the way their roster was, there wasn't Jarrett Allen's a guy, like, you said you like Jarrett Allen. I think I wasn't as high on Jarrett Allen at the time. He's looked very good since, but they didn't have a young player for me that I would want. Like, let's say that you could even have as a throw-in, right? When you look at those packages, the Miami Heat had Tyler Hero. It was like, okay, Tyler Hero may be included in the package. And that's a young player that I thought had a lot of upside. Tyrese Maxey, it's a young player I was really excited about, had a lot of upside. I didn't really see that guy on Brooklyn's team at the time. And so that did make what the return package was going to be a little bit more tricky. But independently of that, right, 13 months out from trading a superstar, even if we got one of those guys, right, like a Tyler Hero or a Tyrese Maxey, I don't think either of those guys is going to have this Rockets team in contention right now. So,
I don't think it's about contention though, Don. Yeah. Like, I think it's more about what you got in return for your superstar. I think that's what a lot of fans are upset about. That's what I'm upset about.
Yeah. And for me,
the fact that you gave up your superstar for nothing.
Yeah. And so
you gave up your superstar for no NBA ready talent right now.
Yeah. You're gonna lose trading a superstar like 99% of the time. That's just kind of the nature of the game. We
But you
did
got
we
nothing
did lose. Yeah, we did lose that trade. Like you said,
for nothing.
we have to see. We're gonna have to see what these picks come out as eventually, and what they end up doing with them. That's not fun in the near term. Like kind of like what you're leading to, right? Like you want a team that can be competitive right away. But I think if we can get a Paolo, a Jabari Smith, a Jaden, not Jaden Hardy, sorry, Jaden Ivey. If we can get one of those guys in, I think. I don't know if I would take one of those guys over a Tyler Hero or a Tyrese Maxey, but I think those guys are going to be in the same echelon. So, not that it justifies what happened with the Harden trade, but I think we're going to get back to a place where we have good draft assets, we have good young players, and we took the F- on the trade, right? We'll say that, but I think we're going to get back into a place where Rockets fans are going to like the product that comes onto the floor a lot more than they are even right now, because this team is still in flux. You have a lot of guys that have competing objectives. You have the young guys that are just trying to get better. You have Eric Gordon and Christian Wood that are trying to get there at this point. I think we need to kind of finish the job of the Harden, not rebuild, but the exodus of players that are from the Harden generation, right? Because Eric Gordon is really the last guy that was from that time. And
but
then we need to start turning the page on some of that. Once we can get some more young players in here and start looking better, it's looking more competitive as a team again.
But they're not. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Is that they're not. It's
for now.
The fact that they left off a guy like Jared Allen from the trade because our cheap ass owner doesn't want to pay legit NBA talent right now because they don't feel like they can win an NBA championship is sad to Rockets fans. That's where we are. In my eyes, that's what I see.
I would definitely agree that they're not trying to pay big contracts right now, and they are paying John Wall's contract.
Me off.
Yeah, they are paying John Wall to sit there, which there's something to be said for that, and not a whole lot, but that paying John Wall to sit out, that was honestly one of the moves that was really surprising to me, because I didn't think that they were even going to do that when they were going into the season, nor did I think John Wall was going to agree to that, but that was one of the first things where I was like, this team is willing to eat that whole salary if they can, move him. I'm sure they will. But the next big landmark that I'm looking for in terms of confidence and ownership is buying out John Wall. I think going into this offseason,
yes,
they need to buy out John Wall. Just pull the ripcord, be done with it. It'll be the best thing for both sides because he wants to go, play real meaningful minutes. The team has wanted to focus on young guy development. So I think that's a good landmark for fans to look out for in terms of if this ownership group is really committed to, doing things the right way and not just cheaping out, then they need to buy out John Wall. And, they bought out Daniel House. Obviously they waived Daniel House, that was a lot lower financially of a bar, but should they have held out on Daniel House and tried to, salvage, get like some sort of KPJ type protected second round pick for him? I think they did the right thing just to, cut him loose at the time they did. We'll see what they do with Tice because, Tice isn't a bad player. Tice is in a situation where he's being asked to do more than he really needs to be as someone who is, a career role player. He needs to be set up by a point guard that can really get into the lane and break down the defense. And this team really doesn't have that. We want Kevin Porter Jr. to be that. We want Jalen Green to be that. But they haven't shown that they can do that consistently. Jalen Green. How do you feel about Jalen Green? You've said that you didn't like that we got Cade Cunningham. Who was the person that you really wanted coming out of the draft last year? Was it Cade? Was it Mobley? Was it Jalen Green?
I mean, in my eyes, the guy that I wanted was Mobley.
Okay.
Look, Don, the fact is that they were the worst team in the NBA last year. They should have had the number 1 pick. I wanted them to have their choice of the guys coming out of the draft. And
I think, yeah,
in my eyes, like that guy should have been Cade Cunningham. I like it. I love Jalen Green. I think Jalen Green is a star. My thing is that they should have had Jared Allen through the James Harden trade. So you had, your big guy, and then you had, Cade Cunningham coming out of the draft.
I do think
Look,
one thing I thought about in terms of Jarrett Allen, and it lost me.
he's a star.
It was lost on me until this point. But
He's a star.
when we were making that James Harden trade, we already had Christian Wood. So not every team really has the stomach to do a two big lineup the way that Cleveland has tried to do it. I think a Wood Allen front court may work. I think it would probably honestly work better than a Şengün Wood front court. I think an Allen Şengün front court would probably be the best combination out of those three. But for the organization, to bring in Jarrett Allen when they're already paying Christian Wood to take up the center spot, I think that was one of the other reasons they hesitated about bringing him back, because they were going to have to pay Jarrett Allen. So again, looking back in hindsight, yeah, they should have taken Allen and not worried about Christian Wood. When you just signed a guy like that they were talking about as, oh, this could be our franchise guy, I think from an organization perspective, they were thinking, if we bring in a guy to basically undercut Christian Wood, that's a hard sell for Christian Wood specifically. From an organization building perspective, you want to get the most talent in as possible, but Christian Wood hasn't revealed himself to be someone who is, very flexible and malleable as a personality, right? Where he would just take that and be like, oh yeah, y'all bringing in someone in my same position, that's fine. I'm all the way about the team. It seems like Christian Wood does have a little bit more about, it's about me with Christian Wood. And again, that's to the detriment of organization, team building. And, that may hurt us for the next 5 years, but I think that is one other thing people do have to remember is we did just sign Christian Wood. The three big lineup has worked very well for Cleveland. I think those guys have just a very complementary skill set between the three of them, because you have three guys that can shoot, two guys that are great rebounders, and then two guys that are great defenders, and then Jarrett Allen's a good rebounder. Evan Mobley's a pretty good positional rebounder. Those guys could stand to be a little bit bigger. They're kind of thin between the two of them, but I just feel like between those three guys fitting very well, and also Cleveland having Darius Garland. I don't know how you feel about Darius Garland. Darius Garland for me is one of the better young guards in the league right now. Sorry, what you gonna say something?
No, I mean, Garland's fine, but not over KPJ, not over Jalen Green. That's all.
I would say
this. I mean, that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah. I think production wise right now, Garland is, handily outplaying both of the guys that we have on our team. I still like Jalen long-term over Garland. KPJ's ceiling is probably higher than Garland's is, just because of the physical tools. But, with KPJ, is he going to be all the way there mentally? Is he going to be with the team that long? His shot has really struggled in a way that Garland's hasn't. But just in terms of Jalen, I think the team has done a really good job making sure that Jalen doesn't become a guy like Harden did, where he gives up the ball and he just stands there. I think that's been a very deliberate coaching point. Right. When you watch Jalen, he's working off ball a lot. They have him running off of multiple screens. And again, with how athletic he is, he's a guy that should be cutting a lot. We've seen how effective Kenyon Martin Jr. has been as a cutter with Şengün on the court. We haven't had a ton of Jalen Şengün minutes, just the way that, Şengün developed while Jalen was out. Christian Wood is currently still the starter. We'll see how long that lasts for, but I want to see Jalen getting those type of off-ball cutting reps as well with Şengün, because, Şengün is just an incredible passer, very great court vision and awareness. But circling back, right, Darius Garland is a very good guard. They had Rubio and Colin Sexton as well. That's just a very good guard trio for Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen to walk in for, where those guards are setting up everything for them in a way where even Christian Wood isn't getting those type of looks given to him at this time. KPJ is a decent playmaker, but he's just not as consistent and not as cerebral of a facilitator as Ricky Rubio is. Ricky Rubio, not the most athletic guy in the world, but he can distribute the ball, right? That's what he came in here to the NBA as, a great passer, a guy that has some good defensive tools. And, that's definitely to the benefit of the Cavs. The Rockets don't have a guard that's like that at this time. When Harden was here, Christian Wood looked like the best center in the NBA. And once Harden left, we really haven't had a guy that's been able to get him the ball the way that James Harden was able to in, 4 or 5 games that they played together. So, from that aspect, I do understand why Christian Wood is frustrated, right? He came here to play with James Harden, to play with Russell Westbrook, and now he's playing with Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green. So from that standpoint, I can understand why he's frustrated and why, personally, I haven't talked to anyone about this aspect specifically or heard anything about this, but, I think he would probably welcome a trade as well, because he wants to be with a guard, again, let's say LaMelo Ball, right? One of the best young guards in the league. And, the Hornets have Terry Rozier as well. That's another guy that can really get Christian Wood involved on that front. But I get where you're coming from in terms of, wanting to get Jarrett Allen. I think, again, what I tried to outline there was there's a little bit of complicating factors there to why, Allen didn't make sense at the time. And in hindsight, absolutely, I agree with you, has looked like a terrible deal. Should the Rockets have tried to hold out and get Maxey? It seems like Harden really wanted Brooklyn, and that's why they ended up caving on that front. They got the maximum amount of picks available after they strung the Sixers along. But ideally, for me, yes, we would have gotten a good young player from Brooklyn. Maybe Nick Claxton, right? Maybe that was the guy that it should have been coming back. But, where we are now, we can rehash what that trade was. We can't really do anything about it at this time. With the guys they have now, I think I'm comfortable with where the Rockets are in terms of scouting and talent evaluation. They went all in on getting the picks. And, one of the things that is going to make that work is having a great drafting and talent scouting teams. And from what we heard last year, Rafael Stone made it a very big point to go bring in a lot of draft specific guys. They brought in some draft Twitter guys. They brought in, some other people that are really known for draft scouting. And for me, that was, I've outlined, a couple of things that have, given me a slight bit of confidence in the ownership group since the time where, like I said, I didn't like a lot of things that happened during the Harden era, but spending some extra money to bring in an army of, draft experts. If you're going to go all in on the draft package, that's what you have to do. You have to say, we are going to maximize every single pick that we have here because, that's basically what we sold the farm to do. So I'm holding out a little bit of judgment on, those picks. If they can nail all those picks the way they nailed Josh Christopher, Alperen Sengun, and, Jalen Green, that one kind of, fell into them by the slot they were at in the draft. But, Christopher and Sengun, those guys give me a lot of confidence in the way they scout. KJ Martin too. KJ Martin, they bought that pick and they ended up drafting KJ Martin in the late second round, and he's like a very good player. I think KJ could stand to improve his handle a little bit more to open up some things for him as a driver and, maybe even some self-creation stuff. But, those 3 guys, I'm very confident in the Rockets' talent and scouting evaluation departments. But we'll see. We'll see, because we don't have as many picks as we did last year going into this draft. And we'll see what they do with those Brooklyn picks. If they can take those picks and consolidate them. Oh, I got caught for quick. Give me 1 second. Sorry. If they can take some of those picks and start squeezing them together like they did with Sengun, right? You take 2 picks, merge those into 1 pick, move up in the draft and get a guy like that. That would be something that, in terms of moving the timeline forward, right? If they want to take some of those later Brooklyn picks and start getting back into the first round again the way they did last year, I think that would be something that would be very, very beneficial because, like I said, their scouting and their drafting has looked very good so far. So that's one way, like you said, fans want to get the ball rolling quicker. I think getting more picks on the front end, using those picks that we got in the Brooklyn trade, is one way that we can speed that process along.
No, I'm totally with you, Don. Don, thank you so much, brother. I mean, tonight was fun, man.
Can I get Astros take off real quick? You said we could talk some Astros.
Yeah, man. I mean, hey, man, you give off your Astros take before we wrap up the show tonight. The floor is yours, my brother.
All right, I want to see Alex Bregman have returned his MVP form this year. That's my challenge. I want to see that from the Astros. Obviously, the Correa situation is up in the air. We want him back. I don't know if he'll be back, but I think if you get Bregman, Altuve, Jordan, you get those guys playing at an elite level. I think we could see that team right back in the World Series like they were last year, and making Yankees fans very, very sad on the timeline. So,
hey, man, hey, making them sad on the timeline is what we're looking for. Don, thank you so much, brother. I mean, tonight was fun, man. I mean, you encouraged the entire timeline of where we need to be Rockets wise. That's all we can ask for.
I hope so, man. Because again, like I know I'm coming off like a little bit pro organization stuff like that, but my brand, like how I operate, like I'm very homery. I'm not like someone that tries to get down on the team and stuff like that. But again, I think there are reasons to like at least people's quarrels with ownership. I'm going to kind of set that to the side. From a basketball ops perspective, I think there's a lot of things to be excited about this team in the direction they're going. I don't want anyone to jump off a bridge, jump off a ledge like before the trade deadline. Like, sit tight, wait to see what happens at this trade deadline. Maybe we will get some of those pieces. Maybe we get, like we said, PJ Washington in from the Hornets, and that's a guy who's already on the upswing of his career. So I think once we finish the Harden era strip down, that's when you start getting those guys in, like you said you wanted, right? Some young talent that's getting into the prime of their careers. So I would say again, everyone, if you're concerned about the Rockets, you've been a Rockets fan your entire life, hold on, don't jump off the ledge just yet. Wait till the trade deadline. We'll see what it looks like, and then we'll reassess from there. But for me, it's like 5 weeks. It's going to be a long 5 weeks. Buckle in, and there's going to be a lot of Rockets rumors. There's going to be a lot of Rockets podcasts to be aggregated for me. But that's where I'm at right now. Let's go out there and hit a grand slam on the trade deadline, and then we'll be able to reassess where things are, because again, like I'm not going to sugarcoat where we are right now. That Mavericks game was very disappointing. You hate to lose to a rival anytime. We could have 15 G Leaguers on the roster. I don't want to lose the Mavericks. It doesn't matter who they're rolling out there, but that would be my message to everyone. Just hang tight. The trade deadline. Let's see what we can get for Christian Wood. Let's see what we can get for Eric Gordon, and then we'll reassess there. If the fire alarms are still going off, then hey, maybe time to call it them. But for me, I'm hanging tough. I believe in Rafael Stone. I believe in Steven Silas. He's going to start getting these guys playing better once we can kind of fix some of the guys that don't want to be here, quote unquote, on the roster. So yeah, but again, I just want to say thanks for having me. I had a great time. This is the first podcast I've ever done where I got to sip some beer on it. Usually I'm trying to be right down the middle, locked in. So that was definitely a great time. And hey, I would love to do it again, man. I know Tuesdays and Thursdays was the day you said you really hammer in. I might be able to swing one of those. It just depends on what my recording schedule is, because those are the days that we do. But yeah, I definitely would love to be back on here, man. So appreciate you having me, and thanks to everyone that tuned in. Y'all are great. I love the people that commented. We do the live, the spaces stuff, but there's no comments on there. So if people are just in the chat chilling, like we really aren't able to see that. So it was definitely cool to get some live chat function in.
Don, I can't thank you enough, my brother. This is great. A lot of Rockets news, coming between now and the next couple of months. We'd love to have you back on, as soon as possible. So, Don,
we'll be in touch for sure.
We appreciate you, my brother. You're good people, and enjoy the rest of the weekend, and we'll talk soon.
Absolutely, man. Peace. Go Rockets.
Hey, this has been episode 174. Beer Sports, whatever. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, through Around the Block podcast platform. So, Don, you're the GOAT. We'll talk to you soon, my brother.
Love it. Peace.
Brother.